Welcome to the 20th episode of the 1796 podcast, a monthly podcast that features exclusive interviews and in-depth news about the Tennessee National Guard and the Tennessee Military Department.
The 1796 podcast is produced every month by the airmen and soldiers of the Tennessee National Guard Joint Public Affairs Office. I'm Lt Col Malone.
I'm Master Sergeant Hamm.
And I'm Captain Hall, your co-host of the 1796 podcast. Next month marks the 30th anniversary of the Battle of Mogadishu, which many Americans remember as Black Hawk Down. We have the privilege to interview Master Sergeant Jay Survey from the 118th Medical Group, who was in Mogadishu in October of 1993. He will share his story and experience being in Somalia during those fateful October days. And of course, we'll brief you on the latest news impacting the Tennessee National Guard in our Tennessee B.L.U.F news segment.
Before our interview, we want to take a few minutes to provide background on Somalia and its capital city of Mogadishu for context as to why American troops were in country in the early 1990s. After World War II, what is now the country of Somalia was made up of two protectorates, one by the British and one by the Italians. In the early 1960s, Somalia gained its independence and formed one state from those two pieces. A few democracies followed, but from 1961 to 1991, the country was ruled by General Siad Barre after he seized power in a military coup. By 1991, warlords in the country of Somalia were waging civil war, leading to widespread famine. The following year, the United Nations established relief efforts to provide food and medicine to the civilians of the country. However, the warlord factions intercepted much of that relief aid, and those items became political currency amongst the warlords. The most powerful faction in Somalia, starting in 1991, was by General Mohammed Adid and his coalition of the strongest militia leaders. August 1992, President George H.W. Bush initiated Operation Provide Relief, which was a military undertaking by the 5th Special Forces Group and supported by 10 C-130s and their crews. Despite U.S. engagement, Adid's forces still intercepted much of the relief intended for starving civilians. Tensions flared in June and July of 1993 as General Adid's troops killed 24 Pakistanis, 5 Moroccans, and 2 Italians. And his actions against the United States were dramatically escalated when Adid's troops killed 4 U.S. military police officers. Those attacks changed the American response, and Adid became a top target for capture. U.S. Army Major General William Garrison was tasked with leading the raid by Special Operations Forces on the Olympic Hotel in Mogadishu, where Adid was thought to be hiding. On October 3, 1993, an assault group landed via helicopter and secured the hotel, taking 24 prisoners in the process, but Adid was not located. American ground forces attempting to reach the hotel for extraction were delayed by Somali roadblocks and subjected to constant gunfire. 2 Black Hawk helicopters attempting to reach the hotel were shot down by rocket-propelled grenades, leaving the air crews highly vulnerable at the crash sites. Sadly, the resulting attempts to reach the crash sites resulted in multiple casualties and the capture of one of the Black Hawk pilots, Mike Durant. The surviving aircrew hunkered down for the night. The next morning, U.S. and UN relief forces launched a rescue mission for the surviving aircrew. In total, U.S. casualties in the Battle of Mogadishu numbered 18 dead and 84 wounded among fewer than 200 personnel involved in the initial assault. Durant was released 11 days after his capture. The battle resulted in a major change in U.S. policy as President Bill Clinton ordered American troops out of Somalia. In this episode, we remember the courageous soldiers and American military personnel who served during the Battle of Mogadishu. Please stay tuned for the interview immediately following this month's B.L.U.F news segment with Captain Hall.
Up first this month in the Tennessee B.L.U.F, soldiers from the Tennessee National Guard's Finance Management Support Detachment departed Tennessee on Tuesday, September 5th for the first leg of a year-long deployment to the Middle East. The detachment stationed in Nashville is a finance unit comprised of National Guardsmen trained to process soldiers' pay, provide debt management, and safeguard the Army's financial assets. In other news, 2 UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters from Knoxville's 1 230th Assault Helicopter Battalion are supporting the Louisiana response to the Tiger Island wildfire burning in Beauregard Parish, the largest wildfire in the state's history. The 12-person team, which includes the flight crews and ground maintenance team, departed from McGee-Tyson Air National Guard Base, headed for Louisiana. They will be using Bambi buckets, a specialized bucket system suspended from the helicopter to deliver hundreds of gallons of water from the air to fight the wildfires. The Blackhawks will pick up water from nearby water sources and drop it directly on the needed areas. And in national news, federal lawmakers are continuing to debate whether to establish a Space Guard after 3 years of deliberation. The House of Representatives included a provision creating a Space Guard in its 2024 version of the National Defense Authorization Act, but the Senate version did not include the creation of a Space Guard. The two chambers must reconcile the legislation before it heads to the President's desk for signature. That's our Tennessee B.L.U.F for this month. And now, over to Lt Col Malone.
All right, listeners of the 1796 podcast, welcome. We're thrilled to have you with us. We have a special guest with us today. We are joined by Master Sergeant Jay Survey, who is in the 118th Medical Group at Berryfield Air National Guard Base. Master Sergeant Survey, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Colonel, for having me. This is looking forward to this conversation together.
All right, you are here because you were in Mogadishu, Somalia, during the Battle of Mogadishu. And so, before we get into that was 30 years ago. So October 3rd and 4th is the 30-year anniversary of that battle.
Yes, sir.
So that tells us you've had at least a 30-year career.
Yeah.
All right, so give us a synopsis of that career.
Yeah, you put it that way, it's almost comical, isn't it?
I'm right
Wow.
there with you, so.
Yeah, so 1990, oddly enough, October of 1990, joined the Tennessee Air National Guard fresh out of volunteer state community college playing baseball, and didn't know where life was going, so decided to join the military, and had some friends that I made that were in the Aeromed unit there at the unit, and talked me into coming out and signing up. So started off with aeromedical evacuation with the 118th, which led for 24 years and many deployments. But you think you join an aeromedical evacuation and you're flying everywhere. Well, it's not always the case when you have a ground element that you have to take care of. But and then that was 24 years, right at 24 years, and then we took on a new mission, the UASs, and we took that on. So it was one of those moments in your career when you stay when you're a lifer like we are.
So just to let our listeners know, the 118th had C-130s.
Yes.
When those C-130s went away, aeromedical evacuation, you didn't have a place to put your patients.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we were borrowing from other units to come down and support us in our mission. Right, so 135, 17s, well, back in the day, 141s. But when that happened, we still had 130s. And when they left and we took on our new mission,
right, then,
as an airman, you have to make a decision whether you're going to transfer to another unit that has that capability, or cross-train. And that's what I did. I cross-trained into the UAS field and became a sensor operator there.
Okay.
Then led to a acting first sergeant role, then the balance of civilian and military career as a guards person came into play, so I had to make a call there and step down from that to take on my civilian responsibilities as far as the Nashville Fire Department goes, and landed a seat back in the medical field at the clinic.
Yeah, so let us know what you do on the civilian side.
Yes, sir. I'm a district chief on the Nashville Fire Department. I've been there 28 years, and have a resume that is extensive there also, from firefighter to Homeland Security liaison, to fire instructor, then to captain on the equipment, and then moved to the Office of Emergency Management, where I was the chief operating officer there, and worked closely with TEMA. So for those that are wondering about Nashville, that's the Nashville branch of emergency management. Worked closely with TEMA in that, and then that led to a homeless impact director position for the city of Nashville as an interim. Once that time was served, then I went back to the fire department. Now I'm a logistics chief.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
I guess being medical, and a temporary first sergeant for a while in the unmanned. What I'm trying to get at is your civilian and your military career kind of dovetailed pretty well.
Yeah, well, the reason why I'm in the fire department is because of Mogadishu, Somalia, where we did some work with the flight line fire department. You know, we put things in a box until we're deployed, and we realize that those assets are going to be used wherever they're needed, not just in their normal everyday realm, right? So I attached with the fire department there in Mogadishu, Somalia, did some rescues with them. I was like, you know what, I want to do this at home. And that's how it led into me becoming a firefighter here in Nashville.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's perfect.
Yeah,
Great.
fit. It fit.
All right, so you were in Aeromed Squadron,
Yes,
the
sir.
118th.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to being at Mogadishu Airport during this window of time?
As a good guardsman back in those 90s, we had a major softball team that competed nationally, and we were close to each other. Well, there was someone named Mike Ney that most people may have heard of if they're from the Nashville unit, came to me and said, hey, there is a need in Mogadishu, Somalia called Restore Hope, and we need you to go. And I said, let's make it happen. You know, the way it was sold was a humanitarian effort from a dominating drug lord that was there who was dominating the resources, right? And we were going over to help teach and support folks on how to stand on their own, right? Which, you know, quickly turned into something that went down in history.
Yeah, so the UN was providing humanitarian aid,
Yes.
food, medicine, water, and the warlord was taking that and using it as currency.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, 130's dropping, you know, food off, you know, parachuting it in and things like that. So, yeah, it was a big effort that turned sour kind of quick.
Yeah. So what window of time were you there?
So
like we said, October 3rd, 4th was the...
Oh, yes, sir.
The movie, of course, made it famous.
Yes,
We know about
which
it.
is nicknamed Bloody Sunday.
Right.
And we're doing this interview on a Sunday.
We are.
Yes, we are. So isn't it weird how things work sometimes, right? We deployed Charlie, Thomas, Sylvia, and I deployed in August of '93, and we flew in on a C-5 in the car in the passenger area up top where you have to climb the ladder, remember, and get up there and sit backwards and all that stuff, right?
Right.
And flew in, and still young, 23-year-old. Like I said, I'm still fresh in the Guard. I got in '90, so we're going over there in '93. So, you know, training medically was about a year. So really, I only had a year in the unit before I deployed, right? So to get, you know, on-job training, you know, things done like that. So left college, went to that, and then next thing you know, I'm on a C-5 rolling over there. Get there. Of course, it's hot. It's desert. I don't know what to expect, but in my mind, I've already processed humanitarian effort, right? Because I was raised by a social worker, right? My father. And so meeting human need was important. So that's where I was. That's where my mindset was, you know. But I could also provide, you know, medical support for small injuries or whatever that might be while we're there, right? And maybe even teach some of those techniques to local nationals to help them provide for themselves. So, you know, had that in mind, and we go in, and it's, of course, it's a desert, but it's an airport in this area, and we fly in, and it's hot as all get out, and we're met by some other Guard members, and away we go.
All right, so you were at the Aeromed station at the airport. That was your center of operation,
right?
Hub,
yeah.
Right. So what was that place like leading up to October 3 and 4?
Right.
What were you doing?
So that area that you're made mention to was called a massif, right? And a massif is a mobile air staging facility, which is known as ERPS nowadays. So they changed the name, same application.
Gotcha.
What we would do there is we were a staging facility for injuries that needed to be aerovec'd out.
Right. And that makes sense, right? You were Aeromed.
Right.
So you were there prepping people.
That's right.
To do the
right. So they would get injured of some sort. I mean, shark bites were popular over there. Maybe some small rounds or something like that, or a twisted, broken ankle from doing normal everyday things. And we were handling those, and we would fly those out on available aircraft that would come in. So basically, we're a holding facility for up to 72 hours. But most of the time it was 12 or less, depending on available aircraft and how quick we could get them in and where their destination and where they were going. Most of the time it was Germany, but Cairo to Germany and all that. That went on for a couple weeks, right? That kind of pace of that. And when, you work shifts because it's a 24-hour operation. So you work days, mids, or nights. And, you get into it, you just happen to be in the middle of nowhere doing it, right? And then it's tent city. So we had our living tent. We had a CE tent. We had our AOT tent, which is the coordination piece of the aircraft. Then we had our chow hall tent. We had, the tent's a little tent city right there.
All that was at the airport?
All that was right off the tarmac, right? So to draw a picture, right? But this airport had been blasted. So it's not like you're flying in the Nashville, right?
It's a flat line, not necessarily an airport.
Yeah, it had a building, but I wouldn't call it much. But so we were set right there on the tarmac. Naturally, you want that MASF beside the tarmac so you can carry patients to the rear or front of the air, whatever it might be, to the aircraft, right? Because they come in on the tarmac, turn around, park, and then we load. So naturally, we're right there. And that's where most time you try to do that operation. And then a few weeks later, some larger aircraft fly in that are unmarked. And remember, I'm green. I'm a baseball player that just happens to be a medic, right? These big aircraft, and the nose of this aircraft comes up, and the tail drops, and off roll these little helicopters, and guys running around, and all kinds of stuff, and then they started taking over the tarmac and parking areas, and then there was a hangar. So there was like a little one-way street or pathway in between our tent and the hangar, because we were going to use the hangar if there were ever an influx of patients that would outreach, that would fill the tent.
Right. So overflow.
Overflow, right? Yeah. But then these guys come in and they take over the hangar, and next thing you know, I'm seeing a bunch of guys with battle rattle, rocking and rolling, and I'm like, okay, this is okay. So I guess more support, more operations, we're good. Right. Didn't know who they were, what they were, but get to know them pretty quick.
So that was the task force made up of MPs and Army Special Forces.
Yes.
And then they had helicopters to support, obviously, Blackhawks and
the little
birds.
The little birds, the little birds, And then, so you had the elite Rangers, you had Rangers, and then your GIs that were staged in that hangar, and plus down the flight line. So you got to remember, this is a UN effort. So all the way around that flight line, 360 were different camps of different countries that were supporting the effort. Pakistan, Australia, the Italians, all of it. So it was
part of the UN.
The UN effort, right. So we didn't really see them on the flight line per se, but they were camped on the other side of the actual runway.
Sure.
Right. So there you go.
So that's leading up to it.
Right.
So from your perspective, what happened that day? October 3rd comes around.
Yeah.
What were you doing, and what was your experience during the Battle of Mogadishu?
All right. So we'll lead up to that. Yeah. So as they get in and get settled, their general and one of their docs got together and said, that little massive right there, that's a great little place for a clinic. Right? Wouldn't it be? Yeah, okay. So we then started attaching with them and their medics and setting up more of a day clinic for normal stuff to help in their support of them. And so that relationship started bonding there. And then we had a couple of incidences that happened outside the fence line because our supply route by ground was a one-way road to downtown, and that's where we have to go get our supplies. Well, so from 2 to 4, it would run east to west, and from 4 to 6, it would run west to east, right? So you could, and it had barriers all the way down this road for reasons, right? And we had a water truck, 2 water trucks that got the schedule mixed up. They met head on, and I had to go out with the fire department as a medic because they didn't have medics. And go out, and it was the first time that I'd manned a 60 and had a 16 on my back and had to go out and rescue these guys. So we ended up having to use 2 Humvees to pull these cabs apart to pull the guys out. Landed a Black Hawk beside us, load them on the Black Hawk, flew right back to where I was going where some other forces met him or met them and took care of him. So that's where my passion for the fire department got lit up. Except I don't have to carry an M16 on in Nashville. You had to do it there. So it was an eye-opening experience. So those type incidences were happening where the relationship between the Army and the Air Force medics was growing, and then they tasked 3 or 4 of us to be a part of their team. And that's where that relationship started. So then we started training with them on the Blackhawks, and just doing exercise stuff with them in case anything were to happen or anything like that. So being naive and young, I just thought this is normal operations. But what was really happening was the pace was picking up, right? So I had youth and ignorance on my side. So that's how I guess I got through some of that, was youth and ignorance. But the pace, it was ramping up. So you asked me about October 3rd, they're ramping up. So every night around 6 to 7 o'clock, the enemy, so there was a fence line right off base, right? So right past that building, you would call a hangar or whatever, about 300 or 400 yards from that was the fence line, and there was a road that ran along the fence line. Well, they had these old Toyota style pickup trucks, and they'd put an RPG launcher in the back and do 70 miles an hour, 60, whatever, and go as fast as they could, that little thing, and just start launching RPG rounds, because now we had assets on the tarmac.
Big, easy ones to see.
That's right. And then the hangar, and then us and personnel. So they were taking pop shots. Thank God they had terrible aim. Right. But we did have, injuries, come from that. 1-offs, 2-offs, so the pace was picking up, right? So, you'd see that happen, and then the little birds they'd run out to the little birds and the Blackhawks and take off in the air and go out, and you just see tracer rounds flying everywhere, and then next thing you know, they're coming back, and so you're like, okay, so, and then we would receive injuries from that and treat those and then evac them out. So then October, it was Sunday, it was a normal day, so 90 to 110 degrees out there, and most of the time, if you're not working the day shift, you're hanging out on the veranda, which the veranda was basically a tent that had the sides rolled up on it, and we had pallets with some wood covering the pallets, and we called it our patio. That's where we kind of were able to relax a little bit, right? Yeah, and just a normal day, and you would see every once in a while down the flight line when the sun was going down, especially when those RPGs would pop off, you tracer rounds going towards the enemy, and it became a normal part of the day. Well, from what I've been told, I didn't, experience this part, that the Muhammad Adid was the drug lord that we are speaking of right now. There was an opportunity for these guys to seize him, capture him, and do some intel and try to figure out what was going on, right?
I remember correctly, a bunch of his lieutenants.
It was an executive staff. It was an executive staff meeting that was supposed to go down, right? And so they formed an operation to go handle that, and was bad intel. And so the Blackhawks, they can fly pretty low, and which makes them a target. But I don't think we were ready for the amount of firepower they had, right, and their coordinated effort in that. So that's when the Black Hawk got hit, and that's when things started spinning up.
Yeah. So they go out to do this operation to go to the hotel and take these people, and that's when everything happened.
Yeah, bad intel, and we had received a few, but we weren't, in those briefings, need to know type basis, right? And you're talking about the elite Rangers at this point, so we didn't ask, we just did what we were told at that point. And now, leading up to that, we were playing volleyball during the day. If we weren't training with them, they had a big area, and they had food for days. So, and we'd go hang out and do our thing with them. It was my first experience in brown T-shirts, Ranger panties, which are those little black shorts, right? Yeah, and combat boots, right? So we were all really cool. And Oakleys. Oakleys were brand new, so we were cool, man. I'm telling you, we were cool, and we got to know them real well. Yeah, I can go down the list of names in my head right now. So right before October 3rd, I turned 24 in in Somalia. So my birthday is September 26th, so about a week prior.
Yeah.
We had gotten to know these guys pretty good by this point, so they found out it was my birthday, and I was in charge of the clinic that day.
Yeah.
So naturally, they're out doing exercises. I hear the birds come back and all that, and the next thing I know, the back door is slung open, and they're carrying a guy in, and he is hollering like nobody's business, grabbing his ankle. I'm thinking, okay, he's busted his ankle. I said, bring him over here. Let's get a look at him. And well, as soon as we set him down on the cot, then I had 5 Special Forces Rangers jump me. So it was a setup for the word go. Like I said, youth and ignorance, right?
Yeah.
And they jumped me, and the next thing I know, I am zip tied to a cot, and they're carrying me around and making all kinds of stuff happen, and and then blindfolded me and and stood me up on a wall, and then they took the mask off of me, and then everybody was in the tent singing happy birthday, and we're having a good time. So that's the kind of relationship that was going on.
Yeah.
So little did I know, the same guys that I was having a blast with, turn around and a week later I'm life-saving techniques or watching them pass on in my hands. So it was pretty incredible. So that was leading up to that. Just gives you kind of the background of Jay Survey's point of view of what was going on in Somalia. And then, like you said, the Bloody Sunday happened, and the operation was going on in the afternoon. And don't hold me to my times, but I feel like it was 3-ish, 4-ish, right? Like at that time. And then it just started happening.
Yeah, I definitely won't hold you to times. I've done research for this interview,
Right.
and I've watched documentaries and read timelines, and it was so much and so complicated. It's hard to remember. So no, it definitely won't.
Yes.
So what happened?
And I'll use the movie as some reference points so folks can understand where I'm coming from, because sometimes I get off course a little bit. But so we were running the clinic. The massive / clinic.
Yeah.
All the guys had gone out on a mission, so we were kind of prepping for some small stuff, like making sure all my bandages and all my airway supply, making sure everything was ready to go, and just kind of doing that. The first patient that I received, now there are 2 incidences here that happened. It was downtown, right? And that's the movie, and horrific. And then there was the flight line tarmac, where we received the mortar round, small arms fire while we were taking these guys in.
Yeah.
And that's where I was.
Right.
Okay, so before that,
the stuff happened on the tarmac, and the clinic was not in the stuff.
No. It
It
gets kind of referred to with the Humvees, because the Humvees were taking folks to somewhere, and it didn't really show the stadium, but it was somewhere. Well, that somewhere was the tarmac.
Sure. Yeah.
Where we became a first line level of care to send them back to a MASH unit to get them back to get them evac'd out.
Yeah.
But that was days later, so during the battle. The first patient I received was in the movie. You see a guy miss the fast rope and he falls into the dust. Right. He was my first patient. He came in, being carried by his guys, and extensive airways and all kinds of stuff was going on for him. And it felt different because the guys were dressed different. They were blacked out. They were battle rattle had changed from desert look to all black, small helmets, ballistic vests, knee pads, elbow pads. I'm like, something's different. Something's going down. And then one of the guys said, "Jaybird, man, get ready because this shit's on."
Gotcha.
And I was like, okay. So we had that one. There was like a little lull, right? We had that one. We got him off in another Black Hawk to the MASH unit to get him stabilized. And there was a it may have been 30 minutes, I don't know, but it just felt like a lull, right? But but at the same time, the intensity that was in that tent, like it was uncomfortable because we didn't know what was going on. And then, like I told you, mortar rounds pretty much every night. And then we started getting a couple of those. Well, we gotten used to that, right? And our tent was surrounded by pallets, and anybody in the military will know what I'm talking about when I say aircraft pallets, not wooden pallets, but the metal ones that are the 6x6 or whatever they are, right?
Slide into the rails. In the
That's
back
right.
of the plane.
That's right. Well, we had them stacked up as tall as the tent around the perimeter of the tent, and then at the entrances we were sandbagged up so naturally ingress egress out of the tent. So we would get into the tent thinking that was, the tent's not going to shield you from an RPG.
Right.
But, just in case one landed beside, we had the pallets and all that. So, we get ready for that. And then it started happening. Then, because we didn't know that the Black Hawk had gone down yet.
Sure.
We just knew that we were taking on patients. Well, about the third or fourth patient, one of the buddies that I made that I was telling you about that with the Ranger panties and combat boots, right? One of those friends, right, said, Jay, what's happening? We're in a battle.
Right.
One of the birds went down and we're going in to get him.
Right.
So,
right.
Pray for us, because they knew I was praying.
Yeah.
They knew I was a man of faith.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And they were buddies. So, I was like, okay, let's do it, man. And anyway, we started. So that they started coming in with these guys, and they were messed up. So you got to remember, this is my first, besides practicing on a dummy in school, right, a mannequin, my first real experience with trauma.
Absolutely.
So, anyway, sorry to be emotional, but
sorry.
Yeah,
Totally understandable.
it's just part of it.
Sure.
That one led to 3 or 4 more coming in, and most of them right off the bat were gunshot wounds to the leg or to the arm, or small shrapnel wounds from the RPGs or rockets.
Yeah.
Pace kept coming. It got faster, and more were showing up. Now the guys are in tears, right?
Yeah.
So they're just, and they have to keep running off, into the dark.
Because it's still going on.
That's still going on. You got to keep going.
You got to keep going.
You got to keep going. Because, as a human, we can cower in our fear, or we can stand up and go. You didn't have a choice because you were being shot at.
It's fight or flight.
Yeah,
It's really only
yeah.
one
So
option.
that's what you have to do, right?
Yeah.
And that's where our training comes in. In the military, you don't realize how important that training is until something like that's going down. So instead of cowering down, we started standing up and started treating. And we had to set up triage areas outside of the tent. We had to start moving. And then I don't remember how many patients in I was. They carried one guy in. He's unconscious, but he's breathing. I'll leave names out of it. And then one of the guys trailing the cot coming in, litter. I keep calling it a cot. It's a litter that they're carrying, right? And then we put them on cots to treat them. Handed me his hand, right?
Right.
And, and I'm like, he goes, that's his. And I was like, okay. And I can remember it like it was, yesterday. Yeah. Because the watch was still on the wrist. So it got him about mid-forearm. Yeah. And the watch was still working. And there was a wedding ring on his, a makeshift wedding ring, So I put the hand in a bag and put it in between his legs because we still had to treat him.
Sure.
Well, I'm doing my head to toe on him, and there's another medic in there that was prior Army that became a very good friend of mine. I was doing my head to toe. He still had his ballistic vest on, and because we had to watch out for grenades and all the other things that they had on them,
right,
for themselves to use. And I saw something, and I was like, hold on a minute. And I reached back to my buddy and said, what is this? Help me out. And he was like, don't stop. Yeah. Don't touch him. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what? He said, that's an RPG round that had not triggered itself. That's how slow they were flying. Yeah. Like, it didn't have enough time to rotate enough to trigger itself, right? So because it has to rotate so many times and it triggers itself,
okay.
then it can blow on contact.
Yeah.
Well, it lodged in his chest.
Wow. Right.
So the hand. So in the movie, you'll see a guy in a Black Hawk do one of those numbers where you're fixing to get hit. You kind of turn. You wince or turn. Well, that's what he did. He was wincing or turning. And the fin of the RPG round cut his hand, and the head went into his chest. I'm like, okay, so what so we had to cease operations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because we had 100 people in this tent now. Oh, and just
now you need EOD.
And it's a chaos in there, and there's blood and rags, and and 4x4s and airways laying around everywhere, and we're just still trying to stabilize. Well, we end up having to take him out
away from
and bury him alive.
Oh my goodness.
In sandbags until EOD got there.
Sure.
Now he was unconscious. He didn't know what was going on, but he was still breathing.
Yeah.
I'm just out of college.
Sure.
Okay, so it's crazy. And I'm not even processing any of that yet. And we're still going. And then several more. And then another one that I remember was the doc, that was the Special Forces doc that teamed us all together, had gotten hit by an RPG round. It clipped him.
In the compound.
In the hangar.
Yeah.
And they brought him over, and he was conscious and madder than hell. And being another medic, I'm leaving names out because I want people to tell their own story, right?
Sure.
He was talking to him because we had a lead medic there that was kind of over all of us that had 20 years of experience, right? And he was a paramedic in Denver and all that kind of stuff. And the doc was looking at the medic, and I was at the head because we all had our position in the tent when we received a patient. You're going to take the head, I'll take this, and so that way we were a team in unison. And he was mad as hell, and he kept telling this medic I'm talking about, you will not intubate me. What's my blood pressure? What is my pulse?
Right.
Where am I at? Okay, now do this, do that. And we were just waiting because I saw the medic I'm talking about looked at me with that look like, we're going to intubate this guy. He's going down, Jay.
And you had the head.
I had the head, and I had the two.
Yeah.
And he was cussing, and he was mad, and he finally, went unconscious like we thought because we were stabilizing the leg where he was hit, and we intubated him and got him out, and he came back later on and
harder to tell you what to do with it too,
well, he came back later stabilized with his injury stabilized, and he made it, and he was very thankful for our help, but he knew, and then it kept going. So then I guess we're 12 hours into it. I think it went 72 hours, about 3 days of the battle. And there were lulls. There were like little breaks. You're never on break really, but like breaks in the massive amount of people you're receiving.
Did you just nap over to the
Well,
side?
we got ready. No, I didn't sleep for 3 days.
Okay.
We stayed up on coffee and adrenaline and just kept pumping through because you got to remember the ones we were stabilizing and sending to the MASH unit were getting small surgical things done. They were coming right back to us, and then we had to evac them out. So we had a 2-stage thing going. We had immediate care, and then we had the evac piece at the same time because it was running over each other. So I'm saying 12, 16 hours into it, then the birds are up, and they're on loudspeakers, and Durant had been captured at this point, right?
The pilot of
the pilot of the
Blackhawks,
Mm-hmm. They were on loudspeakers in the aircraft, 24 hours a day, and saying, "Mike, don't give up. Stay strong. We're coming to get you. We're coming to get you. Mike, don't give up. We're coming. You are brother." Blah, blah, blah,
And that was as much for him as it was the bad guys.
Yeah. And that it was time to negotiate. Right. After that 16th hour, I'm thinking in the movie, that's where you see the Humvees kind of get locked in, right, by the street fires and the enemy suppressive fire. And the actual fires they were setting in roads and things where they were blocking us in. And we started receiving patients, from that piece too, right? And I feel like during that time is when we got our big second wave of folks, and that's while Durant was still down. In about 16 hours, it felt like that second wave was happening, and we got some more severe injuries in, and I was able to, and our team was able to stabilize a lot of them, but then there were several that had, died right there in front of me from either blunt force trauma or fall or devastating injury. And so you're trying to process some of that and still provide medical support and meet the mission. That second wave, while we're getting them, that's when the RPG rounds started going off on the flight line. So at that point, we were having to run out on the flight line. So the little birds are coming back in, right? And they're bringing some folks in. And the Humvees are coming in, and we're getting shelled on the flight line. Now, I've got pilots' names in my head right now, but I remember one, we had gotten real close, and he flew in and he landed, and I ran out to the bird, and of course it's night, so all I see is his eyes were being lit up by the night vision. And, he was teared up, and he was looking at me, and he was shaking his head, and he just kept pointing behind him, because he had some folks on there that he was dropping off.
Yeah.
And it was then I knew that we weren't even close to being done yet, right? Yeah. And we're still going, so our team gets those guys off, get them in the tent, get them stabilized, all the meanwhile running back out and dragging guys off the flight line that are getting hit by the RPG rounds.
Right.
It was then that, of course, I've been a Christian in my whole life. Both my grandfathers were pastors. My dad and mom, deacons in the church and leadership. So, but it was then that I had a true in-my-face definition of divine intervention, because I walked away from that without a scrape, not even a jammed finger, or whatever.
And it could have been very different. I read somewhere where you got knocked down.
Yeah, so you're right. One of those trips out, the concussion got me and knocked me down on another guy. I'll save his name, but I landed on top of him, and all he could say was, "Say that prayer." And I'm like, okay, and of course you're doing a self-check, because I'm like, were we hit? But we weren't hit. Yeah. And we kept going back for more folks that were just, the bloody screams, that blood curdling scream, I guess is how it's, said, sometimes referred to, of medic, medic, and they just kept coming and kept coming. And we were, either dragging them off the flight line or helping them, limp off the flight line, or two of us were, doing, pick them up and carry them in or whatever, and to get them stabilized. And was knocked off my feet twice by concussions, once on the guy I was referring to earlier, and then once on a solo run to get to a helicopter. But I think we drug in about, I can't remember the number, Colonel, I'm sorry, but I'm going to say it was 16 to 20 guys that we pulled in from that other battle that was going on. So it was a pretty interesting time. And then I think the whole thing lasted, the intensity piece of that was 72 hours, 71 patients, and 19 of those being special forces that were killed in action. Yeah. Which was, once you got to slow down and settle down a little bit, it set in on most of us. So the weeping and the isolation piece and not knowing how to think or what to think. So if anything comes out of that, the mental health of our soldiers is very important.
Very important. Absolutely.
And it's real.
It is.
I know we talk about it, but you don't see it, so you're just kind of like, you blow it off sometimes in people. But man, if they've been through things, they're dealing. I promise, because I'm still carrying it today. I just started crying a little bit. You know what I mean, about the injuries. It's totally, so you end up carrying that for the rest of your life. That's why freedom is such a precious commodity that we have, because of the price. And when you're young and dumb and ignorant, like I said earlier, freedom is this thing. It's just a thing that we talk about. It's, it's colors and a thing that we talk about in America, right? But man, it's a privilege, and it's earned. And we should always think of those that have served.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I really appreciate it. As difficult, or some of it's funny, some of it's challenging, some of it's difficult. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate it. So let's keep going, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So the main part of the battle settles down,
right.
But you're still there. Mm-hmm. How much longer are you there, and what was that time like?
I think we were there till the last week of November.
Yeah.
You just reminded me of something. I'm going to tell the story. So people would come and go out of that theater because of the different support elements, or, guard orders, how guard orders work, 60, 90, right. 120, 179 is pretty much, right. You hardly see over 179. Yeah. But for all the reasons that we know. But when people would leave the Moog, so we had bunkers that were, that we dug out, and we used those same pallets I referred to earlier as the walls. Mm-hmm. And as the roof, and then we would cover the roof with sandbags, and we'll build it up, below grade enough to stand up down there, barely, and then go above grade a little bit just to give you a little bit more headroom. That was kind of a place you could go and just be by yourself on top, because the sunsets when we weren't getting shelled, were gorgeous. Sure. Yeah. So you could go up there with a lounge chair or whatever, or a stool, and sit on top of this bunker and watch the sunset. Well, we turned that into a platform, a stage per se, for when people would leave, when they'd been there 30 plus days and they would leave before us. Well, the group of medics would get together on top of the bunker, because the bunker, the actual flight line, runway. Sorry, I had runway, not the taxi, the runway. Yeah. The runway was close. Like we could feel, like every time a C-5 or we felt the exhaust in the tent. Yeah. That's how close we were. So we'd get on top of this bunker, and as they were taking off, because they only took off really one way because wind, and we were right next to the ocean, so it stayed pretty consistent. So they would take off. Wheels would come off the ground about the time they were passing the bunker. Yeah. It was sunset most of the time for some reason. So we would all turn around, drop our pants, and moon them as they were, and we called it moon over the Moog, right? Moon over the Moog, and they would take off, and that was our way of saying, you know, screw you and we love you all.
All at the same time, yeah.
So you would have 7 or 8 medics lined up, hip to hip, mooning them as they would leave. So that was one of the traditions. Yeah. So we stayed there, and the battle. Of course, it took several days, you know, for to recover from the battle, the injuries, and getting them Aeromed out, because some folks would take longer at the MASH unit, you know, just to get them stabilized for flight. And then we were flying them out. And believe it or not, after that, I had called home to ask if I could extend my orders. Something unique happens when you go through those type of situations with folks. Yep. And you don't feel like you can leave them. Yep. And didn't know that was going to happen to me, because I was young and I didn't know any better. And they gave me the extension for another 60 days, so ended up doing 120. You were asking about that. It's the bond and the brotherhood and the relationships that are so made in such a short amount of time under that kind of circumstance are they're already battle tested. Forgive the pun, right? Yeah. So you don't want to leave that. Right. And then even the guilt that you feel if you're getting ready to leave, because now you're leaving people that need you. Right. That was a tough thing to do. But yeah, leading out, it had calmed down. They had made some requests for additional resources right after October 3rd for some more air superiority, you know. The AC-130 came in and started handling business. Sure. And it really... After that, he went underground. The Muhammad Adid went underground, and things had calmed down. I mean, I've got relationships with guys that, you know, had kill shots on him that were denied the kill shot, and then they hit him in the calf from a helicopter. Wow. You know, these guys are truly, man, that's a good shot. They're crazy. I remember him coming back and telling me that story, because we were on the veranda. That's where we all met and kind of decompressed every night, or whatever time of the day it was. And yeah, we got to go out and do some more missions on the birds and with the fire department, and so it went almost from pure hell, hell on earth, to more of like normal operations. Especially the last 30 days I was there, and then I felt like it was time, because they took off. The special rangers and that element that was living next to us had finally packed up.
And the national policy changed.
Right. I just remember, you know, the thing I want folks to know, too, is, you know, I talked about the mental health piece of that and how important that is to pay attention to. Is deployments, you know, different deployments. You go to a deployment and it was the best time of your life, or you can go to a deployment and you've seen some things that you thought you'd never see. I know that we've been on a major kick on mental health, you know, lately, because I think we're becoming more educated in it. But I just want people to know that, man, don't ignore the help, because it's there for a reason.
That's right.
So I didn't go get the help initially because I was afraid it was going to get in the way of making another stripe, or being given opportunity to excel, or I felt like people would hold it against me because, hey, man, Jason, he's kind of screwed up in the head from that Somalia thing, dude. We can't, you know.
The stigma.
Right, the stigma, right? So you don't be afraid of that stigma, because we are so much more advanced than what we were in 93 to now, go get the help, and they'll get you back in the game.
And the stigma is something we put on ourselves. It's
Yes.
something that's not necessarily always really there.
Right. Yeah. We're our own worst enemy when it comes to that. So, man, be brave enough. If you think you're brave, be brave enough to go get the help you need, and then get back in your boots.
Yes.
If you want back in your boots, you're afraid of losing your boots, then go get help and get back in your boots and do your job. Yes. I carry that. There are, even yesterday, there are certain sounds or smells or a movement of people, right, that will trigger those detailed thoughts in my head, right, of those remembering those times. Just like, and even on the fire department when I was making rescues out of cars, right, my mind would go back, to those water trucks I was talking about earlier. That time in my life was probably the earmark of where a boy became a man.
Absolutely.
Right, not just by battle, but by the way of thinking, the way we process and prioritize things in life. The military has challenged me, but I also feel like the military has been a major player in my development as a man.
Absolutely.
Right? And for that, I'm grateful.
Yes. Master J. Survey, thank you so much for sharing your story. I bet there's, you said 19 dead. I know there was 84 wounded, 200 people involved. There was probably a lot of people that came through that clinic and that AirMed that thank you and are appreciative of you and are better today because of that action.
Yeah.
So,
one more story.
please bring it. Yeah.
Michael Durant, the
pilot.
one that was captured, right? One that the movie was based on.
Right.
So I stayed in touch with a few folks, and then naturally life happens and you kind of lose touch with folks, and you take on your kids and your wife and car notes and mortgages, and you just kind of lose touch with folks. Durant, I never got to reach back out to. So when Durant was rescued, and I was part of the team that was able to get him onboarded and ready for evac. We got him in. I got acquainted with him, took care of him, and then was in charge of his stuff as we evac'd him out. So 10th Mountain was there. The Special Forces Rangers were there, and hundreds. So the 141 that he flew out on was parked on the tarmac. They had made a line from the Massive to the back of the aircraft.
Like an order cordon.
Yes.
Two rows.
Two rows,
middle,
facing the middle.
Yeah.
I got to walk him down that. He was on a litter. We were carrying him, and we got to the tail of the aircraft, and they stopped, and they some army chant. I can't remember what it was, or maybe I can't repeat it.
Right. Yeah.
They wanted me to give him a shot of Jack Daniels before he got on the plane. So
we got
a good Tennessee whiskey, and we got to because 160th was out of Clarksville. So anyway, we got to do that, and then lost touch with him, but we'll always remember that battle. But 28 years later, our wing had its anniversary, and Durant was the keynote speaker. So they had worked in about 10 minutes for me and him to do a one-on-one.
Nice.
And that was a pretty cool moment.
Do you remember the shot of whiskey?
Yeah. Well, he was on morphine too,
Right.
so I don't know. I don't know, maybe. He said he did out of being nice, I think. But, But what a great story he is of overcoming obstacles and pursuing life, because life is precious, right?
Yes.
So we have to keep going. So that was a true moment for me to be able to see him and deal with a lot of stuff that, you carry around when you go through something like that.
Master Sergeant Survey, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Absolutely.
What a great story of leadership and servant and just really appreciate you being here today.
Yes, sir. It's been a fun ride.
I'm so glad that people are going to get to hear your story through this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for having me. And to all those that catch this podcast, you are precious and you are appreciated.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to the 1796 podcast. If you like what you heard, please consider subscribing, sharing this episode with friends, and giving us a 5-star review. The 1796 podcast is produced by the Airmen and Soldiers of the Tennessee National Guard Joint Public Affairs Office. For more information, please visit www.tn.gov/military.